And so what you get sometimes are these individuals who get to lead or get an opportunity to lead the group because they have some sort of benefit. Um, for example, because they're physically strong, they can help the group, they can protect the group, but then they are going to use that particular position in the group decision-making hierarchy to establish their dominance.
Yeah, and of
Because
course,
that's also in nature, and then it's when things go awry. Then is when things can go wrong.
yeah, and we see that today with the collapse of these totalitarian regimes, and now in the um, Middle East, but I mean in the Arabic world, but I mean it just repeats itself throughout history. Basically, is that these so-called leaders were just basically pillaging their own people,
Yeah.
and that was just a straight up dominance, not good for the group, just straight up exploitation. Basically, is one form of leadership. Now, of the many things we can talk about, what makes our species so fascinating is that often we insist on the absence of leadership, leaderless societies, especially hunter-gatherer societies. So,
Right.
can you talk about the kind of egalitarianism which in some contexts,
Mhm.
makes sure that there are not leaders?
Right. Yeah. So I think we have a strong tendency. We've evolved a strong tendency as humans not to want to be dominated. I'm pretty sure about that. We also have a strong tendency, of course, to coordinate our activities with others. So sometimes that requires us to have leaders. But as we know from the hunter-gatherer literature, which we review in this book, and we base ourselves, for example, on the excellent work by Chris Bohm about the
Right.
hunter-gatherer societies, is what you see there is you see egalitarian societies, communities with very little power differences. They still need to solve these coordination problems. And what they do is some individuals just, as it were, have a little bit more influence within a narrow specified domain because they are the excellent hunters, for example. They have a lot of knowledge about hunting, and so they'll lead the hunt, if you like. Um, but that doesn't give them any opportunities to actually lead outside that domain.
Right.
So they can't go back to the group and say, well, because I'm such a good hunter, I'm also going to be the peacemaker here, or I'm going to want to have a bigger share of this or that.
Or
I
you
mean,
can't.
it,
They can't even have a disproportionate share of the meat.
no, well, I mean, this is it. I mean, that is the egalitarianism. They can't be boastful about their abilities. They can't lead in other domains for which they're not really qualified, if you like. And so, what these egalitarian communities have is they have mechanisms in place to make sure that A, they can solve these coordination problems if they arise, but B, by sort of putting in front of the group particular individuals with particular talents or skills, but B, they're going to make sure that those individuals, by virtue of some qualities they have, are not able to dominate them. But that's a very sort of delicate balance, if you like, and some communities probably are better at solving that problem between wanting to be led on the one hand, but not wanting to be dominated.
Yeah. And let me mention another great book, The Spirit Level by Wilkinson and Pickett, on the
Yes,
importance of equality at all social scales, nations, states within the United States. These dynamics take place at all scales, all the way down to the hunter-gatherer size group. So there could be no more important issue to discuss, actually, as far as human affairs is concerned. And
exactly. Yeah.
that brings me to my next question, which is that this is also fascinating intellectually, but what practical significance does it has to the managerial or business person? And I know that your book is intended in part for that audience.
Yeah.
In part, it could be read as a business book, for example. But
Right.
what do uh, the evolutionary perspective contribute to that level of
Right.
practical understanding?
Yes, we do address that in fair amount in the book. We have the final chapter is called "From Savannah to Boardroom,"
Uh-huh.
where we talk about these lessons. Now, I mean, one of these lessons is an obvious one. So we argue that really our brains evolved in these small, informal, egalitarian communities, and that means that if you are to build if you were to build complex organizations with multiple layers of hierarchy, etc., what you still have to make sure is that there is some room for having informal relationships, personal relationships between those at the top and the workers. And you can actually do that these days by, for example, making use of modern technology such as the social media. And if you were to want to be successful as a CEO, for example, you really have to try to form some sort of intimate connection with your followers at each level of the organization. And so what we argue is CEOs who make use of all these social media, for example, Facebook, Twittering, sending podcasts out, but also showing their face on the work floor.
And it also
Well,
has to be authentic, because if it's
it
not
has to be,
authentic, it's
yes.
a big ripoff, and I mean, that's always a problem. But continue.
Yes, and that also means that what we are craving for as followers or employees, if you like, is for this personal relationship, and so something like charisma, you could say, well, that's not important anymore because we have these bureaucracies, everyone has their own responsibilities, but we're really our brains are really attuned to following charismatic leaders. But that means that there also has to be some personal relationship between the workers and the managers at each level of the organization. So that's just one of the lessons we mentioned. We
Yeah, and I
talk
could
about.
add that let's zoom in on charisma as a topic. What is
Right,
charisma? Is that a personality trait? I think not, or in part.
right,
Maybe it is in part, but in part, what it is, I would claim, and it's a great topic for scientific study, is that
right.
if you're the average person and you discover something which really works extremely well,
Mm,
then you will have charisma at that point, because you'll be so
right,
anxious to communicate it and so on and so forth that regardless of how you were before, you are
right.
now that charismatic person. So charisma
Yeah,
is actually a way that cultural evolution works, so that the
right.
person who's come up with a great solution is the magnet that other people follow. And so
Exactly.
that's
Yes.
a great
Yes, that's a very nice way of putting it. So, I mean, w- where it comes from, I think, in a way, still remains a puzzle that we have to solve as scientists. But we do know that regardless of how you set up your company or your business or your organization, that element of leadership is still important. It is what people respond to, if you like.
right. Well, I'm actually going to we have more to talk about, but I'm going to actually set that up as a separate interview.
Right.
Therefore, let's end this one. First of all, show us a copy of your book.
Oh, wow. I have it with me. Surprise,
What do you
surprise.
know about that? Available everywhere, and including Amazon.com. We'll make sure that we provide a link
Right.
on our page. And so stay tuned for the next interview with Mark Van Vugt. And until then, this is David Sloan Wilson for Evolution, This View of Life, the magazine that approaches anything and everything from an evolutionary perspective. Thank you very much, Mark.
You're welcome, David.